Now, there is no doubt about it at all that HBO as a studio, when you take a closer look at them, they really do have a lot of hits and misses at this point, especially a lot of misses lately. We know that what they are doing right now with The Last of Us Season 2, it is a colossal failure across the board, creatively, when it comes to the ratings, when it also comes to their damage control efforts to really tame the Backlash, as well as what they are doing with the Harry Potter series and what they did with Snape, and also what they did with Velma and Velma Season 2. I mean, the list just goes on and on. Let's also not forget about Looney Tunes and what they did there a couple of years back. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new, and like this video to see future updates. You can also follow me at Mike01. I thank you also very much for the great and kind support. Now, we know that many HBO executives out there, and now even Pedro Pascal, they are trying to really just water down the Backlash. They are trying to take, of course, a lot of shots at the critics, a lot of the people that are questioning this series, a lot of those that are calling it out for what it is, which is basically shifting away from the source material on a massive scale, alright, to the point that a lot of people are looking at The Last of Us Season 2, they're looking at characters like Joel and Ellie as unrecognizable in this iteration of The Last of Us. Now, what's interesting about all of this has a lot more to do with how Pedro Pascal is handling the criticism, much like how he called out Marvel fans, you know, not that long ago when it came down to the female Silver Surfer as the main focus, instead of the actual Silver Surfer, Norrin Radd. But let's get into this overall, you know, situation and exactly what's going on, not just over at HBO, but what's also going on in Pedro Pascal's mind. So, one thing is for certain at this point, is that with The Last of Us Season 2 ratings disaster only getting worse week by week, especially after the last episode, one massive development going on now involves more to do with Pedro lecturing and getting very defensive with the fans ahead of the season finale, which is due, by the way, on May 25th. Now, Pedro recently delivered the following. In my experience as a male feminist and one who supports LGBTQ and all the most important things in this industry is that we have to not be afraid of the loudness coming from so-called fans or supporters. As far as I'm concerned, if you are overly focused on raising awareness and supporting LGBTQ and you are one who tries to stop that, I don't see anyone like that as a fan. I see that as someone attempting to ruin the fun for others. We all need to learn the basic concept of balance, and the concept of fandom culture has become so toxic. I have seen this with Star Wars, I am seeing it now with Marvel, and I am dealing it right now with The Last of Us. And people have no clue what they are talking about, sadly, when they decide to criticize something that is very insignificant to the core story of the show. We are here to support everyone, and by shifting away from the source material here and there, and flexing the story from what was told in the video game, it shouldn't really matter all that much when you are trying to adapt it into live action form. This is all about trying to remain fair to everybody, and when you have nothing but noise getting in your way, it creates problems. It creates those coming from the LGBTQ community to lose their confidence, and that's not good for anybody. It's not good for us. We need to learn to adapt. We need to learn to welcome everyone. It's disgusting behavior lately coming from those that are against support for so many of these communities, and how we are actually executing it in the show. It's about time that we normalize acceptance for LGBTQ into many stories moving onwards, not just as side characters or supporting roles, but to provide them as the spotlight that they deserve. Now guys, let me just stop here for one moment about Pedro Pascal. Look, I will say this, I am not a fan of this guy at all, period, the end. As a person, I really am not. Is he a good actor? He has some good acting moments in his career, but I just feel like there's a lot of things that he stars in at this point that just really don't meet expectations at all. Now look, I will say this, that he is overcast within Hollywood, within the film industry. It seems like every time you look to the left or the right at a specific project, Pedro Pascal is in it, and people, I think, are just getting a lot of Pedro fatigue at this point. They're getting very tired of his also nonsense with activism, with how he spews everything about LGBTQ this, trans rights this. It's just the same old, same old. We already know that he's defending HBO's iteration of for the Harry Potter series and what's going on over there with the race-swapped version of Snape. He fully supports that. And again, we know that time and time again, Pedro only makes matters worse. He already made matters worse for Marvel when it came to defending everything, when it came down to DEI, when it came to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Everything. Even before he was cast as Mr. Fantastic in Fantastic Four. But this is where it really begins to get worse. He goes on to allude further, I can only hope that people eventually grow a better mind and start behaving like adults, because there is an obvious attack on this industry. There are a lot of false narratives out there about those that love to act and enhance their career, while also expressing their views and how they display activism. I would definitely say I'm a proud activist, and I will stand for trans rights. I will forever stand for LGBTQ rights. When you decide to shift from source material in any live-action adaptation, you should expect the fanbase to understand that in order to do that correctly, you must bend the rules to create something original and unexpected. Guys, let me just say one thing, alright? What we saw just recently when Ellie says, I'm gonna be a dad, that was not only cringeworthy, it also shifted away from the true source material, and it really drove a lot of fans away. Now look, that wasn't the only reason why people are, really criticizing Season 2. There's a lot of other reasons that we could talk about all day about this. But he goes on to actually conclude, and that's just how it's gotta be, he says. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is something I will defend forever. And with the projects I'm working on right now, it's only right to pressure many of these studios to do the same. I value HBO and their efforts. Again, there goes Pedro Pascal, doubling down on his agenda, doubling down on activism, and look, he admitted that he's a full-on activist. He is, of course, a male feminist. He admits that. He is open about that. He is very much open about that day in and day out. And look, this is exactly why I call them activists, because they use their acting career to promote their activism. Nobody wants to listen to it. Nobody wants to hear that garbage. Let's be very real about this. And at the end of the day, look, let's look at the reality of the situation here, is that yes, we know that this is by far the worst iteration in The Last of Us in live-action form, because they are shifting away from source material. They are doubling down on cringeworthy moments in this show. And you have people like Pedro Pascal defending it all. Really defending it all and acting like nothing is wrong. Now, we already know that there is a Season 3 in play, and there's a lot of things going on right now over at HBO when it comes down to whether or not they should reverse action on Season 3. We'll have a lot more to talk about that in the coming days, so stay tuned on that. But again, this is exactly why a lot of people aren't all that thrilled for Pedro Pascal starring as Mr. Fantastic in the Fantastic Four. Of course, you're going to have a divided audience on that. You're going to have differing opinions. Some people may like that idea. Some people may like the fact that he is cast as that role. I for sure am not. I think he is really not fit for Mr. Fantastic. I think it's a miscast. They could have gotten somebody way better, in my opinion. But that's the least of the problems when it comes down to the film industry at this point. Again, I think that HBO, they are losing subscribers. They're going to most certainly lose a lot of those that subscribed strictly for The Last of Us, and I would like to hear what everyone has to say about all of this below in the comments. And if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys later.